Hello again and welcome to another Warhammer 40k Mordy and Glory video. Today we are doing another unit review and we will be taking a look at the venerable armoured fist of the Imperial Guard, the Chimera APC. Now, for those of you catching one of these videos for the first time, what I like to do is go over the general stats of the vehicle and give you an overview, and then drill down into some specific pros and cons, and finally give it a summary with an overall score. Do I recommend it, or do I tell you avoid this unit? So that's what we're going to be doing today, and without further ado, let's dive straight into the video. The Chimera is the quintessential armoured transport of the Imperial Guard. For as long as the faction has been around, there have been Chimeras taking guardsmen around the battlefield, getting them where they need to be, and providing decent fire support at the same time. It is a classic of the faction and a much loved unit in the Imperial Guard roster. And there are a number of reasons that this unit is so popular. From a rules point of view, the Chimera has always done a great job of blending a good amount of firepower with a decent amount of speed, with a respectable level of durability, and all of that with a good transport capacity, often above the transport capacity of what other factions APCs can do. And all of these advantages come at a very reasonable price. The Chimera has always been one of those transports that has made other factions kind of jealous for just how efficient it is and how many you can cram into a guard army. Outside of the rules, this unit has always been favored by the guard community because it just looks cool. It is a transport. It is uncomplicated. It does what it says on the tin. You can see the firepower, you can see the thick armor plates. It just looks like a real world transport that has been put into the 41st millennium. So aside from the rules, aesthetically it does tick all the boxes that a lot of guard players want from their armored vehicles. So after such a glowing introduction of this vehicle, I bet many of you are excited to know some specifics about the Chimera APC, especially in the new guard codex. So let's dive into those now. Starting off with its battlefield role, the Chimera is a dedicated transport. That means that for every infantry unit in your army, be that a character or an elite or a troop choice, for every infantry unit in your army, you are able to take one dedicated transport. So for example, if you are taking a command squad and 3 squads of infantry, you would be allowed to take 4 Chimeras in your list. They do not suffer from the rule of 3 like many other units. They are similar to troops in that they have exceptions that allow them to get around it. Essentially, you can always take a transport for one of your squads. The Chimera can hold up to 12 infantry models. That's actually a very generous carrying capacity by many 40k transport standards. A lot of them have a 10-man carrying capacity, which can make it a bit tricky to include a nice full squad and a character. But the Chimera just doesn't have that problem. You can bung in 10 Kazakin in there, have a Commissar come along for the journey. Hell, stick a Castellan in there as well, and they all can just have a great time inside of the Chimera. So it's got a very generous transport capacity, and that is very important because often just transporting an infantry squad or a Kazakin squad or a Science squad from point A to point B isn't enough. Many Imperial Guard units rely upon the support of officers and other support units to really get the most out of them. So having that ability to not only transport an officer or another support character and the squad really is a massive point of favor and a real unique selling point of the Chimera. Now, in regards to its speed, its firepower, and its durability, I would describe a Chimera as a straight down the middle medium vehicle. It has got more firepower and durability than something like a Sentinel, even the armored version, but it is in no way in the same leagues as, let's say, a Lehman Russ, which is a dedicated vehicle that I would describe as a heavy tank. To go into specifics, the Chimera has a movement of 12, a weapon skill of 6+, a ballistic skill of 4+, a strength of 6, a toughness of 7, 11 wounds, 3 attacks, leadership 7, and a 3+ save. I do want to highlight the fact that the Chimera does have 11 wounds. A lot of veteran players in the Guard will have got used to the fact that the Chimera has had 10 wounds all throughout 8th edition, but now with the 9th edition book, it does have that extra wound. I really like that it's got an extra wound. It is a surprisingly big boost in its durability. I mean, it's a 10% overall increase in the number of wounds that this thing has. What I find really good about it is it means that the enemy tends to have to shoot an extra decent bit of anti-tank firepower into this unit. For example, a lot of factions out there tend to use a lot of damage to weapons. Previously, they would have had to get 5 through to kill the Chimera. Now they're going to have to get 6 through to kill the Chimera. It is a surprisingly important boost in durability for this vehicle. In terms of its Wargear options, the Chimera comes as standard with a hull heavy bolter, a lasgun array, and a Chimera multi-laser. That hull heavy bolter can be replaced with a heavy flamer, and the Chimera's multi-laser can be replaced with a Chimera heavy bolter or a Chimera heavy flamer. There is an important distinction between the hull heavy bolter and the Chimera heavy bolter and the hull heavy flamer and the Chimera heavy flamer. Essentially, if it is the hull version, it hits at the Chimera's basic ballistic skill of 4+. If it is the Chimera multi-laser, Chimera heavy bolter, or Chimera heavy flamer, that is the weapon in the turret, and all of those weapons benefit from the new turret weapon special rule, which means they have +1 to hit. In terms of cool little upgrades that you can put on this thing, it can take either a heavy stubber or a storm bolter, and it can also be equipped with a dozer blade, a hunter killer missile, or armored tracks. Out of all of these weapon options, this is how I would equip a Chimera. I would go for a multi-laser in the turret, and I would go for a heavy flamer in the hull. The reason I would go for the heavy flame in the hull is it gets around the relatively average to poor ballistic skill of the Chimera, because heavy flamers just automatically hit. And I'd go for the multi-laser in the top, because the multi-laser actually puts out 4 shots versus the heavy bolters 3 shots at a better strength as well, and the same AP. The only difference is that the heavy bolter does do slightly more damage per shot, but in a game where there's a lot of reduced damage, you tend to find that the heavy bolter is actually doing 1 damage a shot rather than 2. And so that's why I would normally default to that Chimera multi-laser for the volume of fire. As for those optional upgrades, I would say you can't really go wrong with slapping a heavy stubber or storm bolter on top of this vehicle. At the end of the day, they're pretty affordable, and they do add a little bit more DACA to this unit. In terms of which one to pick, it really is player preference. They basically do the same thing. I would avoid the dozer blade and the hunter killer missile. I would avoid the dozer blade because it ignores any modifiers to your move, advance, or charge rolls. But typically, Chimeras are going to be maneuvering around terrain because they can't go through it because their vehicles are not infantry. So I don't think it's really that helpful. And the Hunter Killer Missile is a one-shot crack rocket. And whilst that is useful on certain vehicles, such as Sentinels, which can hit on 3s with rerolling 1s fairly easily, it's not very good on a Chimera who's tending to be hitting on 4s without any kind of reroll nearby. So I would say on the Chimera, avoid the Hunter Killer, although don't dismiss them entirely on other vehicles. And lastly, I would say when it comes to the armored tracks, really comes down to if you've got any spare points at the end of the day in your list. If you find that you've got 15 points left over and you really just have nothing else to spend them on, then slapping some armored tracks on some of your tanks is not the worst choice that you could do. So that's where I would say armored tracks fit. They are not mandatory, but they can help fill out some points and add a little bit more durability for your vehicle against small arms fire. So now that we've gone through the Chimera and its stats and war gear, let's take a look at how it performs on the battlefield. What are its pros and cons? Well, the first thing is that it has very good firepower for a dedicated transport. It's one of the things that really makes it stand out in comparison to other factions. If you compare this to a Rhino, either a Space Marine 1 or Assisted Battle 1, then you'll find that they come with a Storm Bolter. For you, the Storm Bolter is the optional extra. You start off with way more firepower than that. If you compare it to maybe something like a Dark Elder Raider, which has got a single Dark Lance on it or a single Disruptor, I mean, it's not as much firepower as having a Heavy Bolter, a Heavy Stubber, a Multi-Laser, and 6 lasguns in the lasgun arrays. I mean, it really does come with a lot of guns. On top of this, many of the Chimera weapons have improved from the last codex to the new one. So, as I mentioned earlier, the turret weapon is a big improvement for a vehicle like this. The Chimera has always kind of struggled to get its shots to land because it's hit on 4s, and the moment it starts going across some dense terrain or the opponent has some kind of -1 to hit modifier, it really has struggled to land those shots. But with +1 to hit now, you're going to find that you don't worry about the terrain as much, and if there is no dense terrain and those -1 to hit modifiers, you're going to be landing a lot of these shots very consistently. On top of this, the lasgun arrays no longer need someone inside the transport to fire, which is pretty big. They are essentially remote controlled now. Previously, you always had to have at least one model, even if it was one officer who's madly running around trying to fire all 6 lasguns at once. Now, it does not say you need anyone inside to fire them. That may change with an FAQ, so just be aware of that and keep an eye on any FAQs on Warhammer Community. But for the time being, at the time of recording this video, the Chimera lasgun arrays, they can fire without anybody inside. In terms of speed and durability, they're fairly decent to average. I mean, you're not having less speed and durability than many other factions. Having a 12-inch move is fairly standard for a medium vehicle. Having toughness 7 is, again, pretty much what you'd expect from a unit of this size. However, whilst the Chimera has fairly average stats for a medium vehicle, in terms of its speed, it is on the slower end for dedicated transports if you look at other factions in Warhammer 40k. For example, if you look at factions like Eldar, be they the Dark Elder, the Light Elder, or the Harlequins, they tend to have transports which are zipping all over the place at 14 inches, 16 inches. They really are much faster. And what you've got to take into account is the fact that the job of a dedicated transport, first and foremost, is to transport. And so doing it quickly is really the main goal. So whilst the Chimera has all of these other great qualities, it does have that sort of little fly in the ointment, which is that it's not the fastest way to get around the battlefield. It's not even the fastest way to get around the battlefield in the Imperial Guard. You've got the Taurox, which has a move of 14 inches. You've got the Valkyrie, which can go 20 to 45 inches in a turn. How I would describe the Chimera is it'll get you there safe and it'll get you there alive, but it won't get you there first. Now, I've already mentioned the large transport capacity of the Chimera, why it's so important. The fact that you can take a squad and a support character or two along for the ride really is a massive, massive positive feature of this vehicle. Probably the main positive feature, even more so than the damage that it can put out with all those extra guns. There is just a couple of extra specific details I want to mention around the transport capacity. If you're taking a infantry squad and it's got a heavy weapon, or you're transporting a heavy weapon squad, each one of those teams will take up 2 slots rather than 1, and Ogryns take up 3 slots rather than 1. They are big boys. So if you're transporting Ogryn around, you can fit 4 in a Chimera because it has a transport capacity of 12. In the new codex, the Chimera has a really cool ability, which is Mobile Command Vehicle. Now, this used to be a stratagem in the 8th edition book, and now it is a datasheet ability that every single Chimera can make use of. How it works is, in your command phase, if one or more officer models are embarked within this transport model, one of those officer models can issue one order it knows. When doing so, measure distances to and from this transport model. Now, I really like this rule from a fluff perspective, because in the lore and in many of the Black Library novels, the Chimera is described as being the mobile command center for many Imperial Guard platoons. Even if you're not a mechanized regiment, maybe you're even just sort of walking around on foot, pretty much every Imperial Guard platoon is described as having an officer and a command Chimera. So it's really cool that GW have given it a datasheet ability that represents its role in the fluff. In terms of its usefulness on the tabletop, surprisingly, it's more of a nice to have than a really strong rule. The point of that mobile command vehicle rule is to allow your officers to stay safe whilst they are issuing orders. But the thing is, your command squads and nearly all of your characters have got the character keyword, which means they benefit from the Lookout Sir rules, which means as long as they've got some other units around them, they can't be targeted by the enemy. Because of this, you don't really need the protection from the Chimera unless you come across some absolute mad lad who is spamming sniper rifles out of the wazoo. But at the end of the day, it's not a disadvantage in any way, shape or form, and you will find it is a good tool to have in the toolbox. It also does mean that the range for certain officers, like Castellans, for example, who've only got a small 6-inch range, will be significantly boosted by being within the Chimera, because you can measure the order range from any point on that model. So you go from a 28mm little base to suddenly a big old box. That's quite nice for your Castellan. The disadvantage is that you can only use one order with the mobile command vehicle rule. So if you are using it for Castellan, he's not going to be able to issue 2 orders. In my opinion, the Chimera is okay as a command vehicle, it's better as a transport vehicle for some of your more elite infantry options in the Guard. For example, I think they personally pair fantastically with Kazakin. I have a number of battle reports on this channel where I use 2 Kazakin squads inside of 2 Chimeras, and they often take an objective, secure a flank, or just generally do a lot of damage to the enemy. Chimeras are great at keeping those high value infantry alive. At the end of the day, despite the fact that Kazakin have a 4+ save and regular guards with a 5+ save, it really doesn't make a huge amount of difference to their durability. There is so much killing power out there that a unit of 10 Kazakin walking around on foot, even if they're in cover, isn't going to last very long at all. But a unit of 10 Kazakin inside of a Chimera is safe. Having a great time, and then they can jump out, get the drop on the enemy, and do damage on their terms. One of my favorite little combos to do with Kazakin and Chimeras is to have your whole army with the Born Soldiers Regimental Doctrine, but then have your Kazakin with their Warrior Elite ability have the Mechanized Infantry Doctrine. That means that you can then put this unit of Kazakin in the Chimera. The Chimera can move, and then they can get out. And that means that you can really get the drop on the enemy, and it's very, very powerful. Within the Guard Codex, the main competition for this unit is the Taurox. The Taurox is significantly cheaper than the Chimera. It comes in at 70 points versus the Chimera's 85. And if you've spent the 5 points for that Stormbolt or Heavy Stubber, which you're probably going to want to do, you're actually looking at a 20-point difference between those 2 units. It is also faster than the Chimera with a 14-inch move versus a 12-inch move. On top of that, unlike the Chimera that has to pay 5 points for those armored tracks, the Chimera actually comes with them inbuilt for free. That means that anytime that anyone shoots the Taurox with a damage 1 weapon, it gets +1 to its save. Against small arms, that is a 2+ save versus the Chimera's 3-up. Now, the Chimera can get the same benefit, but you're going to have to pay 5 points for it. You might be thinking to yourself at this point, Mordy and Glory, why have you been selling the Chimera to me and making it sound like a brilliant unit when there's this Taurox thing waiting in the wings? Why would you suggest the old bull when I could have the young calf? Well, my dearest conscript, the Taurox does have a few pretty big disadvantages as well. Firstly, it's only toughness 6 in comparison to the Chimera's toughness 7, which means that it is significantly less durable to medium firepower. Anything that's an autocannon or autocannon equivalent, of which there is a lot of them out there, will wound the Chimera on 4s, but against the Taurox, it's going to wound them on 3s. The firepower of the Taurox as well is way less than the firepower of the Chimera. It comes with 2 autocannons, none of which have the turret weapon special rule, which means it only has 4 shots hitting on 4s. But the most glaring problem with the Taurox is its transport capacity. It only can carry 10 models. It means it can't carry a full squad and an officer. Now, if the Taurox had a carrying capacity of 11, we would really be looking at a strong contender with the Chimera. But because it doesn't have that, it really is not as good a unit. When picking between these 2 transports, it basically comes down to what do you want from this unit? Do you want a transport that will get you there in a decent time with good firepower, good durability, great transport capacity, and once it's dropped off its cargo, can still do enough damage to contribute to the battlefield? Pick the Chimera. Do you want a unit that is all gas, no brakes, you're going to get there as fast as possible, but once you've done that, the firepower is kind of whatever, and it looks like a vehicle that the Imperium looted back from the Orcs? Then you probably want to go for the Taurox. Overall, I would give the Chimera a score of 8 out of 10. It is certainly a Mordian approved unit. It is a very good unit and transport, not only within the Guard, but also within Warhammer 40k as a whole. Many Guard lists will benefit from a Chimera or even 3 of them. They're just a fantastic force multiplier within your army. But those are just like my opinions, man. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. Are you Team Chimera, Team Taurox, or Team Foot Slogging? No transports for you. Let me know down in that comment section. If you've enjoyed today's video, then please make sure to smash that like button like it's a big titty Eldar girlfriend, and subscribe to never miss an episode. If you've really enjoyed today's video or you have found it particularly helpful, then please consider becoming a channel member or Patreon supporter. There are a whole host of perks and benefits for becoming a channel member or Patreon, but one of the main ones is access to the Mordian Glory Discord. This is a community with over 700 active members inside it. There's always someone to talk to, whether it's about Guard or 40k in general, tactics, army lists, painting, hobbying, even memes, and we also cover things like Dark Tide and Dawn of War as well in there. It's just a great community with lots of experience and a lot of just fun guys involved. So if it sounds like a great time, then please consider becoming a channel member or Patreon supporter and getting yourself inside that Discord. And I just want to take a moment to say a massive thank you to all of the latest channel members and Patreon supporters. We have had an explosion of channel members and patrons recently, so this might take a while, but I do want to say a thank you to every single one of them. So thank you to PJ Horton, Alex Stratton Lake, The Lonely Shepherd, Matthew, The Lychee Cappuccino, IB, Hidalago 334, Justin, Cliff, Robert M, Alex M, Jack, Son of Boulder, Oliver McDonald, Adrian Rolden, Silladillion A, Feels Badman 69, Jay Hickman, Kian, Zoopskim, CT7479, John Thacker, Return of the Mac, Guard Brandon, Axel, The Anglo-Germanic Wanderer, Holden, Dimitri, Rattle, Omega, Zach, Ads, Heretic Dave 40k, Dylan Chester, Ben Andrews, Ryan Kinney, Jack Wellings, FRVN6, Murray Court, Dennis, Shake My Head, Mark Andre, Cherubael, Nolan, Keith, Adeptus Ridiculous, Total Fan, RC Gunner, Duke of Penchington, Mike Niepert, Igra, Richard, John, David Jensen, Tank Sniper, Azragar, Wolfenbach, Alan L, Sabian Wilson, Nick, Dylan Lee, Fisher Fury, Kobold, Ymir, Marshall Diedrich, Glomoff, Robert Lowe, Machello, David Simpson, Lord Biscuit, James Harrison, Sun Gohan, and 101 Sugar High. Thank you guys for becoming channel members. Your support really does make a massive difference. Thank you for doing your part. Of course, I also want to do a shout out for the latest Patreons as well. So a big thank you to Echo Marker, Potato Wrangler, Dan Dodge, Ragnarocus, Tsar Phoenix, Soviet Commubot, Vincent, Ads, Jared, Brian, Rule, Dark One Mushroom, Nick C, Nancy Pinter, Victor, Tack, Blazing Baron, Jesse Kidd, Michael S. Martinez, David, Colin, Stulte, Mr. Joel, Eventure, Adrian, Nathan L, Hatman Hendricks, Old Bean UK, Nicholas, Rob, Sam, Brett, and Chansey. Thank you guys for your ongoing Patreon support. And last but certainly not least, I want to say a personal thank you to all of my top tier Patreon supporters. These are the War Masters, the people that have truly gone above and beyond the call of duty when it comes to supporting the Mordian Glory channel. So a massive thank you to Bonbon Vert, Phil French, Ross Miller, Tequal, Alex Dengal, John Stubbs, Nick Walsh, Swordfish Trombone, Diesel Fox, Tom Sutton, and of course, August Varney. Thank you guys for your very generous support. It really is a big reason that I'm able to do Mordian Glory full time now. I hope you've all enjoyed today's video. Thank you for watching. And of course, as always, I'll see you guys next time.